Hi guys, I'm Katie Roome from ParaPsisPress.com, where I review indie sci-fi and fantasy books. Welcome to the Reading Room. Invocations of the Submortal by William Jeffrey Rankin. Chapter 1, Homecoming. Dusk had fallen as Charlie Minister's train arrived at the station on the outskirts of Middlesbrough. He had taken a few days' leave from the Columbus barracks to surprise his parents, neither of whom he had seen since Christmas. Whence his leave had been granted a few weeks before, he purchased a round-trip ticket, had his suit cleaned, and purchased a few gifts. He had little money left, but looked forward to being with his family. He was excited to see his friends, Sam and Emmy, too. The three of them hadn't been together since the previous summer. He and Emmy wrote to each other every month, so he had kept up on what she was doing, and she had kept him up to date on what was happening in town. He missed Middlesbrough nearly as much as he missed his family and friends. Lately, he hadn't much time to think about anything outside of his duties, and a few days to catch up and actually see everyone was just what he needed. It was cold for the season, and Charlie buttoned his overcoat against the wind as he stepped off the train. New spring foliage rustled in the dark overhead. Nearby ran a stream, close to overflowing its banks, a sure sign of recent heavy rains. It followed the road Charlie walked along before disappearing into the fields and little woods dotting the landscape. It was nearly a 2-mile walk to his parents' farm, and there was just enough light from the stars and moon to see the sights he had missed: the old schoolhouse, the homes where his friends had grown up, and the hill overlooking town. He had even missed some of the old familiar trees and wood and wire fences separating the fields. He took his time, not meeting a soul on the road. It was nearly 9 as he walked up the lane separating his parents' house from the main road. The windows of the house were dark. "Guess I'm too late for dinner," he said. His mother and father generally went to bed early, rising before the sun, but this was early even for them. "Mom, Dad!" he shouted as he opened the door. He stood there for a moment. The house was quiet. He wondered where they could be, then recalled his mother's last letter, mentioning that Aunt Mary, now in her 70s, hadn't been feeling well, and that she'd been staying at her house occasionally. As for his father, it wasn't likely he would be out in the field so late, and the barn was dark, so he must be at one of the neighbors. "So much for the surprise," he said, stepping into the kitchen to make dinner. Afterwards, he helped himself to his father's pipe tobacco and whiskey, and read a copy of the Daily Dispatch, occasionally directing his gaze over the paper and through the window, hoping to see his father walking up the lane. It was nearly midnight when, no longer able to keep his eyes open, he went upstairs to his bedroom. "I hope Dad hasn't turned it into a library while I was gone," he said. No, it was just the same as the last time he'd been home. Changing into his pajamas, he cracked open a window and crawled into bed. He was sound asleep in seconds. Charlie woke with a start. He checked his watch and wondered what had wakened him. Had there been a noise downstairs? The window next to his bed was open, so it was likely an owl in the barn. Or maybe his father had come home. Getting out of bed, he lit a lamp and stepped into the hallway. It was utterly quiet in the house as he stepped into the hall. Before going to bed, he had left a note on the kitchen table. Had his father come home, he certainly would have woke him up. He opened the door to his parents' bedroom. The bed was unoccupied and made up just like it would have been every morning. He could only think they had both gone to Aunt Mary's. As he headed back down the hallway to his room, or what had been his room for so many years, he came to an abrupt stop. A dull, heavy thump had come from somewhere below. Were his parents just now getting in? Charlie walked down the stairs and into the hallway, standing quietly for a moment. There it was again, a shuffling sound followed by a thump. It seemed to be coming from the cellar. He called out again, but there was no response. "The old man's getting hard of hearing," he grumbled. In the kitchen, he noticed that the door to the cellar was open. He didn't think it had been earlier. "Dad?" he called out, more loudly this time. Again, a shuffling sound, like something being pushed along the cellar floor. He wondered if an animal had gotten in. It had happened before. A raccoon or possum would get in when they'd forgot to close the exterior door at the back of the house. They even had a coyote one time. Pausing at the top of the cellar staircase, he peered down into the darkness, then stamped his feet to scare whatever was down there. But the cellar was quiet again. The old wooden treads creaked in protest as he descended, and Charlie felt the cool air of the cellar creep up his legs. At the bottom of the staircase, he shined his lamp around. As a kid, he had always hated the cellar. It was big for one thing, and had a pitch-black, soot-covered coal room toward the rear just next to the furnace. Anyone going in there would come out soot-covered as well, no matter how careful they were not to brush up against the wall or door. The shuffling noise again, and something bumped up against the door. It was in the coal room. Something must have come through the coal door and slid down the chute. Looking around the room for a weapon, he found a 2-foot length of pipe propped against the wall. Hefting it in his hands, he walked toward the coal room. but before he reached the door, it opened on its own. Charlie stepped back as a cloud of thick black dust billowed outwards. A noise like a passing train assailed his ears. Something moved within the cloud, large, sinuous, and darker than soot. For a moment it hovered above two gray shapes that lay huddled upon the floor. Then it moved toward Charlie, wrapping around his leg with a grip as cold and strong as steel. Letting out a yell, he struck at the thing. It made a sound unlike anything he had ever heard, a muffled, wordless cry that seemed to come from a great distance. Its grip relaxed a little, but it continued to wrap itself around his leg all the way up to his thigh. Blinded by the cloud, Charlie struck again and again until the thing fell to the floor. It no longer moved, and the cellar was quiet again. The cloud parted and seemed to dissipate, revealing something darker behind it, a patch of utter darkness with a vaguely human shape. Taking a step toward it, Charlie realized it was hovering nearly a foot off the floor in the center of the room. Deep within it were two tiny points of pale light. Feeling unaccountably drawn to the thing, Charlie stepped forward, dropping his lamp and carefully stepping over the two shapes huddled upon the floor. Suddenly the points of light loomed larger, filling the coal room with an unearthly glow. Unable to close his eyes or look away, Charlie stumbled backwards, holding his arms before his face as the light intensified, shining through the flesh and bones of his hands. For a moment, he thought he understood what the thing was, and his mind retreated in horror. Then the thing advanced, and he was engulfed. If this book sounded interesting to you, I have written a full-length positive review on my website. I encourage you to check it out and to support William Jeffrey Rankin in his other works as well. I'm Katie Roome from periapsispress.com, where I review indie sci-fi and fantasy books. This has been The Reading Room. Thank you for joining me.